Hi, Callie. My name is Caroline. Thank you so much for sitting down to Zoom with me. So, tell me a little bit about yourself. Who are you and what do you do? You can share about past college experience and your jobs and duties as well.
Right. Well, my name's Callie Franca. I graduated from CPA in 2011, and from there I went to Auburn University, where I got a Bachelor in Science of Nursing degree. And after that, I got married, and 6 months later moved to the Dominican Republic to be a full-time missionary. So I work for an organization called DR Missions, and I have a couple different roles within the ministry, the biggest two being community health director and being a child case advocate for our children's program, Bread of Life.
Auburn is definitely my first choice of school, so that's so interesting that you've asked that. I'm actually very interested in going into broadcast journalism and doing their nonprofit and philanthropy studies minor. Why do you do what you do?
So I really wasn't someone who was really interested in missions before I became a missionary, which sounds funny, but it was something that intrigued me, but it wasn't like I never considered it for a future career at all. Yeah. And then I came to visit the Dominican Republic for a week while I was in college, actually working with the same ministry I still work with today. And it was like all of a sudden, immediately, I knew this is what I wanted to do. Seeing the kids, the before and after stories, and getting to be a part of that transition really is what calls me to this work. Getting to see kids come into our program just tiny, malnourished, underfed, not knowing how to write their own names sometimes, and not really ever having understood like the love of a caring Christian adult. And then to go from that to being these happy, well-fed, healthy-looking children who just are confident in who they are, it's an incredible change. And getting to be a part of that is just why I do it.
I've actually had the privilege of going on a few mission trips, and one of my best friends, about 2 springs ago, she got to take a trip to the Dominican Republic, and she said that she absolutely loved it and that it was life-changing. So that's so interesting that you mentioned that, because after her experience and hearing all of her stories, that's somewhere I'd definitely like to go in the future.
Also, I've taken online ministry courses, things about cross-cultural connections and how to live and work in a culture that's not your own. There are a lot of skills. Flexibility and initiative are 2 of the really big ones. So flexibility, because living in another culture, everything is different, and you can't prepare for anything, honestly. And so you have to be able to think on your toes a lot. And so this is like, I think, my 3rd location I've tried before this meeting started in maybe a 15-minute time span.
Really?
Yeah, trying to get a combination of quiet and good Wi-Fi and some lighting. It's a really dreary day. Yeah. So, that's a great example. Just a little bit of flexibility, being able to think on your toes, try out different things. Yeah. And that is something I use every day when working with families and with kids and things like that. I mean, it's a constant part of my life. Yeah. Also initiative though. So because this career, it's different than any other career. And I'm sure everyone says that, but being a full-time missionary, and specifically my work with the children as a child case advocate, a lot of it is self-driven. And so I set my own hours, I set my own schedule. I could work differing days of the week. Sometimes that means I might have 3 afternoons off in the same week. Other times that means I'm working until 8 or 9 o'clock at night with a sick child or something. And other times it means that I'm, working Saturday and Sunday one week and then having off every afternoon the next week. So my schedule is completely I work when I need to get things done. So it's a lot of initiative. I have a couple big projects and quite a few small projects that I'm working on at any time, and I have to prioritize them myself and make sure that things are getting done in a timely manner. But then also, like I said, the flexibility comes in because sometimes new things show up at the door daily that you're not expecting.
Yeah. So tell me about how CPA best prepared you for your career path, and what is your favorite memory of CPA?
So I think CPA best prepared me actually through exposure to nonprofit work and ministry and that sort of thing. We had a lot of speakers who came to chapel services that were nonprofit or missionaries or things like that. I was like, this is interesting. Like I said earlier, it wasn't something I really considered for myself, but I was very intrigued by it. And since I started going to CPA, I went there just for 4 years in high school. And before that, I really hadn't ever met a missionary or talked to one or heard one speak even. And so for me, that was my primary exposure to what ended up being my career. Basically, every weekday, I get to our Bread of Life children's feeding program pretty early in the morning. The kids get here at 10:30 in the morning and they stay until about 12:30 or 1. And so during that time, I'm hands-on with the kids. We have a couple of days a week where we're doing tutoring classes right now because schools here have not started back up. So no children are currently. And so we're doing a couple of days a week where we do tutoring classes just so they're kind of keeping up their skills, little things like Spanish and math, so that they, they're still learning something this year. Afternoons are, who knows, there are a couple days a week where I'm out in different communities doing house calls on various sick patients, checking on them, treating different wounds, things like that. Other days I'm doing house visits around the feeding program children. And so I visit them, and it might be for a health concern that I've noticed that week at Bread of Life, or a disciplinary concern.
Okay, so I actually have a question that's not on my script, but I am very curious to know how the pandemic has affected your ministry.
The Dominican Republic's response back in March was to completely shut everything down for what they said was going to be 2 weeks, but it ended up being about 4 months. That we were barely able to leave our houses. You could only go to the grocery store, and only one person from the family could leave. It was very strict. And so we honestly, I barely saw anyone during that time other than my husband and my own son. And that was it. And so during that time, we had to completely shut down our feeding program. And instead, we bought big bags, 125 pounds of rice and beans. And we put them up in little individual baggies and delivered them to every one of the families in our feeding program. So twice a week, my husband would drive around in our minivan and hand out rice and beans to make sure that all the kids were eating. And we heard from some of the parents that was the only food that they had for the entire week.
Can you tell me a story about your most challenging day and or experience in your field of study? Why was it so challenging?
I feel like there are so many days that challenge me. And it's pretty cool because this is my 4th year living in the Dominican. And looking back now at those most challenging days, I'm like, well, that story turned out really cool. But in the moment, it was hard. Goodness. Okay. So I had one day, and a little girl came to Bread of Life, and she was about 8 years old at the time. And she had a little 4-month-old baby with her, who I guess was her little sister. I had never met her yet. The 8-year-old is raised by her grandma, and the mom's not really a part of the picture. And so I guess the mom came and dropped off the 4-month-old a little while later. And so all of a sudden there's this new baby in the house. And I talked to the little girl, Yarile, and I said, well, who watches the baby? Because your grandma works. And she said, I watch the baby. And it's like, you don't go to school anymore? And she said, no, I can't go to school because I have to watch the baby. And she had brought the baby to Bread of Life that day because she had tried to make a bottle for her. And so you have a little 8-year-old heating up milk on a gas stove, and the milk got too hot, and she didn't realize it and gave the baby the bottle, and something from the steam disconnected the nipple of the bottle and basically exploded milk all over the baby's mouth and down her neck. And so she had bad second-degree burns all over her face and her neck. And the baby was also at the time drinking cow's milk, which is not good for 4-month-olds. It's not giving them any of the fat or the nutrition that they need. And she was also eating solid foods, which is a little bit early at 4 months, but at least she was getting a little bit more. They would give her, they were straining beans and giving her that in a bottle was her other food that she ate. And so she showed up, and I took the baby from her, and I keep baby supplies here because this isn't the first time and not the last time that a sick baby shows up at the door. We've had to rush babies straight to the hospital for IVs because they come to us so malnourished and dehydrated. And so I made her a bottle of formula, and I fed the baby. And I just remember the little girl looking up at me and with these eyes, and I'm just like, how did it get to this point, And little 8-year-old Yarile felt so guilty and upset. And I was doing everything that I could to convince her, this isn't your fault. this isn't your fault at all. 8-year-olds aren't supposed to have to use the stove. 8-year-olds aren't supposed to know how to make bottles correctly. And 8-year-olds are not supposed to drop out of school to take care of their little sister. And I just felt like that overwhelming guilt from her. And I wanted to do everything I could to make sure she knew that, this is just a terrible situation that life gave her. It has nothing to do with her. It has nothing to do with how much she loves her sister or anything like that. And, that was 2 years ago. And Yadi Leigh's 10 years old now. And after a fight, she's back in school. And she's learning to write her name right now, which I'm really proud of her. And she's also working on numbers, and she's so excited to be able to do math. And the little baby sister, Yadi's Leigh is her name. She is, like I said, just turned 2 back in May. She is a little spitfire of a baby, and she is my goddaughter as well, which is really exciting. So after that whole situation, the grandma came and asked if my husband and I would be her official godparents through the church. And so that's something we were really honored to be asked. And here, that's it's not like, I'm never gonna have like custody of this baby or anything. It's not like official like that, but it's the primary guardian of the child picking someone who they know is going to look out for that child's best interest spiritually. And so getting to be that influence on their lives is incredible for me.
I got chills. That's incredible.
Challenging days, oftentimes years later, become some of my favorite days to look back at. And so in the moment, I went home and cried for hours, I think, that day. But then getting to be, a part of their lives going forward has been an incredible experience.
Can you tell me a story about your best and most interesting and joyous experience in your field, and what makes this experience stand out to you?
I would say any day that we get to enroll new kids at Bread of Life is the most joyous day. Because you see, like I said, these terrible situations, and I'm in their homes with them, and then that first day when they walk into the program and knowing that things are going to be different for them is incredible. Just 2 months ago, we enrolled a new family, and it was actually one of our other Bread of Life kids came to us and was like, "Hey, Callie, you need to come meet my neighbors. They need to be enrolled in the program." And I hear that every day, every single day. That. And so I was like, okay, I'll add them to my list. We'll go check them out. And so I went and I met this family, and they were just the most precious, incredible children. And they have a little girl who's 10, a little boy who's 6, and a little boy who's almost 2. And the little 6-year-old boy is wheelchair bound. And so his family is paying an extraordinary amount of money to allow him to go to a different school in a different part of town, where he has to take a special bus there. And they have to pay for not just a seat for him on the bus, but a seat for his wheelchair as well, because there's no storage. And so they are putting any money, tiny bit of money they have. The dad works part-time and the mom's unemployed. And so his entire salary basically goes to keep this little boy in school. And I thought that was kind of interesting, but I was like, okay, but let's talk, let's meet. This is the smartest little boy I've ever met in my entire life. And he is driven and he is intelligent. And I can't imagine him not having the most incredible future. And so getting to meet him and seeing just like this situation that his family was in, that they were almost ashamed, to have to be asking for help. And they welcomed me in and sat me down on their couch. They tried to feed me breakfast. I was like, no, I'm fine. They're like, we have an extra egg. Do you want an egg? And I'm like, no, seriously, I'm great. I just want to talk. I want to get to know you guys. And hearing the mom's dreams for her kids and how they don't plan on letting little Danielle's disability affect him in the slightest. They believe that he has a future, and we believe that too. And so the first day when they walked into Bread of Life, he was sitting in his little wheelchair, and he had his 2-year-old brother in his lap, and his big sister was pushing him along, and they all 3 of them had the biggest smiles on their face. This is why we do this, So that's just one story. Like I said, we have 80 kids enrolled. I could tell 80 more. A kid's first day at Bread of Life is always
How has your faith intersected with your time in college and or your career?
So getting involved in a local church was a really big deal for me. And then in my career, obviously faith is a big part of my career.
Yeah, really big.
I tell little kids about Jesus every day. So that's honestly one of the best parts of my job. But I do think that having a strong faith is so vitally important to any career. Whether you are, on the front lines or behind the scenes, every job you are able to use your faith. So when we live here 90% of the time, but we do go back to the States for a couple weeks every year so that I can keep my nursing license active.
What advice would you give current CPA students who want to follow in your footsteps and pursue a future in your industry? Any college majors or internships that come to mind?
Okay, very first thing I would say is try it out first. Like I've said a couple times now, I wasn't super interested in missions. I was intrigued by it, but I didn't think I would do it. And going on a trip changed that. So give it a try. As far as college majors, there are so many different routes that you could take to get to what I'm doing. Like I said, I'm a nurse. Also, a degree in social work would be incredible. I know Auburn has a minor in nonprofit and philanthropy studies. That would have been super helpful. Minoring in the language of the country you want to work in, very helpful. Just to make sure that you have that good base of the language and understanding. I think that everyone, if you're interested in it, try it out. Our internships are 3 to 8 weeks over the summer, and everyone ages 16 and up are welcome. And it lets you just see what the life of a missionary is like. So our interns go around with us. They do what we do day to day. We have teams come over the summer, and the interns help facilitate the teams. They're also at Bread of Life every day with us, and they get to experience the life of a missionary for a couple weeks. So I think that if you're really truly considering a job in this field, getting an internship and getting that exposure is vital.
Thank you so much for your time. You were such an inspiration and a light to so many, and I'm so thankful for your heart for Jesus. I've been interested in the missionary field for such a long time, and I'm thankful for this opportunity for Mr. Elson for allowing me to interview you, and also just all the insight that you have. I'm really interested in that Auburn program on the nonprofit and philanthropy studies, and I definitely want to continue that as something in my life. So I'm so thankful for you and your impact, and thank you for meeting with me.
Thank you for meeting with me. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, awesome. Okay, have a good day.